Captain Zexhan's 4 eyes scanned the primitive blue planet through the observation deck of the galactic enforcement vessel, Dominion's Edge. The third planet of this unremarkable solar system hung in space like a marble, swirled with white clouds and vast oceans. According to their sensors, it was inhabited by a young species that had barely begun to explore their own star system. "Another backwater world," muttered Lieutenant Vorth, his scaled hands working the tactical display. "Why are we even bothering with this sector, Captain? These primitives haven't even achieved faster-than-light travel." Zexhan's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. As a member of the hegemony's ruling Zephyrian race, he had overseen the pacification of dozens of worlds. This one would be no different. The galactic hegemony had perfected the process over millennia. Identify emerging species, assess their threat potential, and either integrate them as subordinate members or eliminate them before they could become problematic. The Council's xenobiologists have flagged this species as potentially troublesome, Zexhan replied, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. They call themselves humans, and preliminary scans suggest they possess an unusual capacity for violence and adaptation. Better to deal with them now while they're still confined to their home system. The bridge of the Dominion's Edge hummed with quiet efficiency. Crew members from a dozen different species worked at their stations, all of them united under the banner of the hegemony. The ship itself was a marvel of galactic engineering, stretching nearly 3 kilometers from bow to stern, armed with weapons capable of cracking moons and shields that could withstand the fury of a star. "Scanning their technology now, Captain," reported the ship's AI, its voice emanating from speakers throughout the bridge. "They appear to have achieved nuclear fission, basic rocketry, and primitive computing systems. Estimated technological development places them at classification level 2.3 on the hegemony scale." Zexhan nodded. Level 2.3 meant the humans were advanced enough to potentially develop dangerous technologies within a few centuries, but still primitive enough to be easily controlled. It was the perfect time to intervene. "What's their population status?" he asked. "Approximately 7 billion individuals spread across their planet's land masses. They appear to be organized into competing nation-states, with frequent conflicts between different groups. No unified planetary government detected." This was even better than expected. Divided species were always easier to conquer. The hegemony had developed a standard protocol for such situations. Reveal themselves to the planet's leaders, demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority, and offer a choice between peaceful subjugation or total annihilation. Most species chose submission. "Communications, open a channel to their largest population centers," Zexhan commanded. "Begin the standard first contact protocol." As his crew worked to establish communications with the humans, Zexhan reviewed the intelligence reports on this species. They were bipedal mammals, relatively young in galactic terms, with a lifespan of less than a century. They showed the typical signs of an aggressive species: territorial disputes, resource conflicts, and a concerning tendency toward warfare. But they also displayed traits that the hegemony found useful: adaptability, tool-making capabilities, and a basic understanding of scientific principles. If properly managed, they could make decent workers in the hegemony's industrial sectors. Their short lifespans would prevent them from developing long-term resistance movements, and their tribal nature meant they could be easily divided and controlled through their existing power structures. "Channel established, Captain," the communications officer reported. "We're broadcasting on multiple frequencies to ensure maximum coverage." Zexhan straightened his imposing 2-meter frame and activated the transmission. His image would now be appearing on every communication device across the planet below. He had given this speech dozens of times before, and the words came easily. "Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet. I am Captain Zexhan, of the Galactic Hegemony Enforcement Division. Your species has been identified as emerging sentience, and you are hereby notified of your inclusion in the Galactic Census. As of this moment, your world falls under hegemony jurisdiction. He paused, allowing the translation systems to convert his words into the various human languages. On the tactical display, he could see communication networks across the planet lighting up as humans tried to process what they were seeing. You have achieved sufficient technological development to warrant hegemony attention, but you remain far too primitive to pose any meaningful threat to galactic peace. Therefore, you will be granted the honor of joining the hegemony as a protected species, subject to our guidance and authority. The standard terms followed. Humans would surrender all claims to independent governance, turn over their military assets, and accept hegemony administrators to oversee their development. In exchange, they would receive protection from other galactic threats and access to limited hegemony technology. You have 72 of your local time units, which our computers indicate you call hours, to respond with your acceptance of these terms. Failure to comply will result in the implementation of Alternative Protocol 7. Zexhan didn't need to explain what Alternative Protocol 7 entailed. The smoking ruins of 17 other worlds throughout the galaxy served as sufficient demonstration of the hegemony's commitment to order. As the transmission ended, the bridge crew settled in to wait for the humans' inevitable surrender. It was always the same. Initial panic, desperate attempts to contact other nations, frantic military mobilization that would accomplish nothing, and finally the grudging acceptance of reality. Lieutenant Vorth, deploy surveillance drones to monitor their major population centers, Zexhan ordered. I want to see how they react to our offer. The drones, invisible to human sensors, began transmitting images from across the planet. The scenes were predictable: emergency government meetings, military forces being placed on high alert, and crowds of civilians gathering around screens to watch endless news coverage of the alien contact. What surprised Zexhan, however, was the nature of the humans' initial response. Instead of the immediate chaos he expected, many of their leaders were maintaining remarkable composure. Emergency sessions were being held in their various governmental bodies, but there was no sign of the mass panic that usually accompanied first contact with a superior civilization. Interesting, he mused, watching as military forces around the planet began coordinating their movements with unusual efficiency. They're more organized than I expected. Even more intriguing were the signals intelligence was picking up from various human installations. Rather than frantically trying to contact the hegemony vessel, they seemed to be running complex calculations and simulations. Several of their space agencies were rapidly preparing launch vehicles, though for what purpose remained unclear. Captain, the communications officer interrupted his observations. We're receiving multiple transmission requests from the planet. Shall I put their leaders through? Zexhan considered this. Usually, he preferred to let primitive species stew in their own fear for the full 72 hours before accepting their surrender. It made the eventual capitulation more complete. But there was something about these humans that piqued his curiosity. Put them through. Let's see what they have to say. The main screen flickered, and suddenly Zexhan found himself looking at a room full of humans. They sat around a large table, and he could see representatives from what appeared to be multiple nations. One of them, an older human with silver hair and sharp eyes, spoke first. I am Secretary General Chen of the United Nations Organization. We appreciate your contact, Captain Zexhan, and we understand the terms you've presented. Zexhan's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. They were being properly respectful, addressing him by rank and acknowledging the situation's reality. This was going exactly as expected. However, Secretary General Chen continued, we would like to request additional time to prepare our response. 72 hours may not be sufficient for our various governments to coordinate a proper reply to your generous offer. The request was reasonable, and Zexhan was feeling magnanimous. A few extra hours would make no difference to the ultimate outcome. Very well. You will have one additional local day to formulate your response. Use this time wisely. As the transmission ended, Zexhan felt the familiar satisfaction of another successful first contact. The humans were already acknowledging their inferior position by requesting more time, essentially admitting they had no options but surrender. What the hegemony captain didn't know was that in facilities around Earth, teams of scientists, engineers, and military strategists were working around the clock on something far different from a surrender document. Hidden in deep underground bunkers, massive computers were running simulations based on every piece of data they could gather about the alien vessel. The humans had been preparing for this possibility for decades. Ever since the first radio telescopes had detected organized signals from deep space, a secret international consortium had been developing contingency plans for contact with a hostile alien civilization. They called it the Prometheus Protocol, and it was about to be implemented for the first time in human history. As Zexhan settled into his command chair to wait for the inevitable human capitulation, teams of technicians were making final preparations to systems that had been built in absolute secrecy. The aliens had made their first mistake by giving humanity time to respond. They were about to discover that this young, primitive species had a few surprises of their own. The countdown had begun, and Earth was about to show the galaxy what humans did when someone threatened their home. Dr. Sarah Martinez's fingers flew across the holographic interface as streams of data poured in from observatories around the world. Deep beneath the Cheyenne Mountain complex, the Prometheus Command Center had been activated for the first time since its construction began in 1987. What had started as a theoretical exercise in preparing for extraterrestrial contact had become humanity's last hope. "Pattern analysis complete," she announced to the room full of scientists and military personnel. "The alien vessel's hull composition is consistent with our projections based on the radio signatures we've been tracking for the past 40 years. General Morrison, a weathered man who had overseen the Prometheus project since its inception, studied the tactical displays surrounding them. What about their weapon systems? Active scanning shows directed energy weapons, probably plasma-based, and what appears to be a kinetic bombardment system," replied Dr. Kim Volkov from his station. "But here's the interesting part. Their defensive systems seem to be optimized for threats they expect to encounter." "Meaning?" "Meaning they've never faced anything like what we're about to throw at them." The genius of the Prometheus Protocol lay not in trying to match alien technology, but in exploiting the assumptions an advanced civilization would make about a primitive one. For decades, Earth's brightest minds had worked under a simple premise. If hostile aliens ever arrived, they would expect to face conventional resistance. They would prepare for nuclear weapons, chemical attacks, and basic kinetic warfare. They would not be prepared for humans. Colonel Rebecca Stone coordinated the global response from her position at the Tactical Center. Around the world, sleeper agents embedded in civilian populations were activating systems that had been hidden in plain sight for generations. To any outside observer, the massive antenna arrays looked like radio telescopes and satellite communication dishes. The truth was far more interesting. "Prometheus Stations 1 through 47 reporting ready status," she announced. "All lunar installations are online and awaiting confirmation." General Morrison nodded grimly. The lunar bases had been humanity's greatest secret. Hidden in craters on the far side of the moon and powered by fusion reactors that produced virtually no detectable signature. Construction had taken 30 years, using materials launched during routine scientific missions and assembled by crews who believed they were building research facilities. Dr. Martinez pulled up the sensor readings from the alien vessel. "They're maintaining position in high orbit," probably thinking they're safely out of range of anything we might have. Their mistake was revealing their location during that dramatic first contact broadcast. "Time to target?" General Morrison asked. "Lunar stations report firing solutions locked. Prometheus ground installations are charged and ready. We can begin the demonstration phase whenever you give the word." The demonstration phase was crucial to the plan. Rather than immediately revealing humanity's true capabilities, they would start with a show of force that would appear impressive to the aliens while concealing their real arsenal. It was a delicate balance between appearing strong enough to warrant respect and weak enough to avoid triggering an immediate full-scale attack. "Dr. Chen, what's the status on the biological component?" Dr. Lisa Chen looked up from her workstation, where genetic sequences scrolled across multiple screens. "The viral package is ready for deployment. If we can get a sample of their atmospheric systems, we can custom design a pathogen that will target their specific biology without affecting any Earth life forms." It was humanity's ultimate insurance policy. Earth's biosphere had produced countless organisms capable of adapting to hostile environments. If the aliens tried to occupy Earth, they would discover that human bacteria and viruses could be weaponized in ways their sterile starship environments had never prepared them for. "Remember," General Morrison addressed the room, "this is not about winning a conventional war. This is about making them understand that conquering humanity will cost more than they're willing to pay. We need them to decide that leaving us alone is the preferable option." Meanwhile, aboard the Dominion's Edge, Captain Zexhan was growing impatient. The additional day he had granted the humans was nearly over, and he expected their surrender transmission at any moment. His crew had spent the time conducting detailed scans of the planet below, cataloging resources and identifying strategic locations for the placement of hegemony control centers. "Captain," Lieutenant Vorth called from his station, "I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface." Zexhan barely glanced at the readings. Probably their primitive power generation systems working overtime. These emerging species always go through a period of increased activity when they first realize how outmatched they are. What the alien captain didn't realize was that the energy signatures were coming from charging systems that had been drawing power for hours. Hidden beneath Earth's surface, massive capacitor banks were storing enough energy to power small cities, all of it focused toward a single purpose. Dr. Martinez checked her chronometer. 30 seconds to demonstration phase initiation. Around the world, 47 installations that looked like innocent radio telescopes began moving with mechanical precision. Their targeting computers, guided by quantum-encrypted communications satellites, locked onto the alien vessel hanging in high orbit above Earth. "All stations report target lock. Lunar installations confirm synchronized timing." General Morrison took a deep breath. Humanity was about to announce to the galaxy that Earth would not go quietly into the night. "Execute Prometheus Protocol, Phase 1. The demonstration began with what appeared to be a conventional laser strike. Coherent light beams, powered by the massive energy storage systems, lanced out from installations around the globe. To the aliens monitoring Earth, it would look like humanity had somehow developed directed energy weapons overnight. Impressive for a primitive species, but hardly threatening to a shielded starship. Aboard the Dominion's Edge, warning klaxons began sounding as the vessel's defensive systems activated automatically. "Captain, we're being targeted by multiple energy sources from the planet's surface," the tactical officer reported with more curiosity than alarm. "It appears the humans have some sort of directed energy capability." Zexhan's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Fascinating. They've been hiding military technology from our scans. Show me the projected damage assessment." "Negligible, sir. Our shields are absorbing the energy without any measurable drain on our defensive systems. Shall I return fire?" "Not yet. Let them exhaust their primitive weapons. I want to see what else they're hiding before we demonstrate the futility of resistance." This was exactly the reaction the Prometheus planners had hoped for. Phase 1 was designed to make the aliens overconfident, to convince them that humanity's best efforts were merely an inconvenience. Phase 2 began 60 seconds later. The real attack came not from Earth, but from the Moon. 3 installations hidden in lunar craters fired kinetic projectiles accelerated by magnetic rail systems to a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles themselves were simple tungsten rods, but their velocity turned them into weapons of devastating power. The aliens had less than 8 seconds to detect the incoming projectiles. "Captain, massive kinetic energy sources approaching from lunar orbit." The tactical officer's voice had lost its casual tone. "Impact in 7 seconds. These projectiles are moving at 12% of light speed." Zex-Han's 4 eyes widened in shock. The energy readings were off the charts. How had a primitive species developed relativistic weapons? "Emergency evasion. All power to defensive screens." The Dominion's edge began moving, but 3 kilometers of starship could not change course quickly enough to avoid weapons traveling at such incredible speeds. The kinetic projectiles struck the vessel's shields with the force of nuclear weapons. And for the first time in decades, the ship's defensive systems were seriously tested. Sparks flew from control panels as overload protections activated. The lights flickered, and the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated. "Shield effectiveness down to 68%, the tactical officer reported. "Hull stress within acceptable parameters, but we've suffered significant system overloads throughout the ship." Zex-Han stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In his centuries of service, no primitive species had ever managed to inflict meaningful damage on a hegemony vessel. The humans weren't supposed to have weapons capable of threatening his ship. "Analysis of the attack vector shows the projectiles originated from their planet's natural satellite," the AI reported. "Recommendation: immediate bombardment of lunar installations to prevent additional kinetic strikes." Before Zex-Han could respond, Phase 3 of the Prometheus protocol commenced. Dr. Bisuri Martinez smiled grimly as she watched the alien ship's reaction to their kinetic strike. "They took the bait, beginning Phase 3 deployment." What the aliens couldn't see were the hundreds of small objects that had been ejected from the kinetic projectiles just before impact. Each one was a self-contained surveillance and infiltration drone designed to attach to the alien hull and begin analyzing their technology while remaining virtually undetectable. Within minutes, the drones were transmitting detailed information about the alien ship's hull composition, energy signatures, and defensive systems back to Earth. More importantly, they were quietly introducing carefully designed computer viruses into any system they could access. The viruses were humanity's secret weapon, developed by combining traditional computer science with biological principles. They were designed to behave like living organisms, adapting to alien computer architectures and slowly corrupting critical systems without triggering security alerts. "Infiltration successful," Dr. Chen reported. "Our digital organisms are beginning to establish themselves in their computer networks. Estimated time to significant system compromise: 6 hours. General Morrison allowed himself a small smile. The aliens thought they were dealing with a primitive species that had gotten lucky with a few advanced weapons. They had no idea that humanity had spent decades preparing for this exact scenario. Captain Zex-Han was beginning to realize that he might have underestimated these humans. The kinetic strike had been sophisticated beyond anything he had expected from a level 2.3 civilization. More troubling, his ship's sensors were detecting unusual activity in their computer systems. "Run a full diagnostic on all ship systems," he ordered. "I want to know if those kinetic impacts damaged anything we haven't detected yet." As his crew scrambled to comply, Zex-Han opened a communication channel to the Hegemony High Command. This situation was rapidly moving beyond the scope of a standard pacification mission. "High Command, this is Captain Zex-Han of the Dominion's Edge." The target species has demonstrated military capabilities significantly beyond their classification level, requesting immediate reinforcement and permission to implement Alternative Protocol 7. The response came back within minutes. The High Command had been monitoring the situation and was equally concerned by the humans' unexpected resistance. Permission granted, Captain. Reinforcement fleet is being assembled and will arrive in your sector within 72 standard hours. Until then, maintain position and gather intelligence on their capabilities. Do not allow them to score any additional successful attacks. Zexhan closed the channel and turned back to his crew. The humans had bought themselves 3 days before overwhelming force would arrive to end their resistance permanently. He doubted they could cause any real damage in that time, but he was no longer taking anything for granted. What he didn't know was that 3 days was exactly how long humanity needed to implement the final phases of the Prometheus Protocol. The real war was just beginning, and Earth was about to show the galaxy what happened when someone threatened the human species. 48 hours after the kinetic strike, Dr. Martinez stood before the largest gathering of world leaders in human history. The emergency session of the United Nations had been expanded to include military commanders, intelligence chiefs, and the directors of every major space agency. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and everyone in the room knew it. The infiltration viruses have exceeded all expectations, she reported, displaying real-time data streams from the alien vessel. We now have access to approximately 60% of their ship's systems, including navigation, environmental controls, and most importantly, their communications network. General Morrison stepped forward to address the assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, we have confirmed that a hegemony battle fleet is en route to our solar system. 47 vessels, including 3 planet killers capable of rendering Earth uninhabitable. Estimated arrival, 18 hours. The room erupted in concerned murmurs, but Secretary General Chen raised her hand for silence. General, please continue with the briefing. The good news is that our digital infiltration has given us access to their fleet communications. We know their battle plans, their target priorities, and most crucially, their rules of engagement. The hegemony has never encountered effective resistance from a primitive species, so their tactics are based on overwhelming firepower against defenseless targets. Dr. Chen stepped up to the presentation display. Our biological analysis is complete. We've identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in their physiology, including a fatal allergic reaction to a modified Earth fungus that we can produce in massive quantities. She gestured to a molecular diagram. More importantly, our computer viruses have begun rewriting their life support algorithms. In approximately 6 hours, the environmental systems on their lead ship will begin producing an atmosphere toxic to their species while appearing to function normally on their monitoring systems. The plan was audacious in its scope and terrifying in its implications. Humanity was not just fighting for survival, they were about to demonstrate why intelligence, creativity, and ruthless determination were more valuable than raw technological superiority. President Williams of the United States leaned forward. Dr. Martinez, what's the status of Operation Lighthouse? Dr. Martinez smiled for the first time in days. The quantum communication array achieved stable contact with the Andromedans 43 minutes ago. They've agreed to observe our conflict with the hegemony and will intervene diplomatically if we can demonstrate effective resistance. This was the revelation that changed everything. For 20 years, Earth's most powerful radio telescopes had been detecting signals from the Andromeda galaxy, eventually realizing they were communications from another galactic civilization. The Andromedans, as humanity had dubbed them, represented a potential ally in a galaxy dominated by the oppressive hegemony. But the Andromedans would only consider an alliance with species that could prove they were worth the risk of confronting hegemony expansion. Earth had one chance to demonstrate that humanity deserved a place among the galaxy's free civilizations. Phase 4 of Prometheus is ready for implementation, Colonel Stone announced. All asteroid mining platforms have been converted to kinetic bombardment systems, and our Mars colonies have activated the weapon systems they've been secretly building for the past decade. The truth about humanity's space program was far more extensive than any public records indicated. While the world watched carefully staged launches and modest scientific missions, massive industrial operations had been established throughout the solar system. Every asteroid mining platform, every research station, every seemingly innocent probe had been designed with a dual purpose. Admiral Zhang of the Chinese Space Force provided the final piece of the puzzle. The sleeper ships launched 30 years ago have reached their designated positions in interstellar space. If Earth falls, the human species will survive, and they have instructions to contact the Andromedans directly. It was humanity's ultimate contingency, ensuring that even total defeat would not mean extinction. Hidden among routine deep space missions, massive generation ships had been sent to distant star systems, carrying genetic samples, cultural archives, and most importantly, complete records of hegemony capabilities and weaknesses. Captain Zexhan was becoming increasingly frustrated with the deteriorating situation aboard his ship. Minor system failures were cascading throughout the vessel, and his engineering crews couldn't identify the source of the problems. Environmental controls would randomly fluctuate, navigation systems would briefly display impossible readings, and communications equipment would occasionally broadcast strange signals. Engineering. What's the status on those system diagnostics? He demanded. Chief Engineer Korth's voice crackled over the communication system. Captain, we're dealing with what appears to be some sort of progressive system degradation. It's as if our computer networks are being slowly corrupted, but all security protocols show green status. Zexahan's mandibles clicked nervously. He had never encountered anything like this during his centuries of service. The human kinetic strike had been impressive, but this systematic failure of ship systems was genuinely alarming. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from the human planet. Put it through. The main screen activated, showing the same human leader from their previous communication. But something was different about Secretary General Chen's demeanor. Where before he had seemed respectful and somewhat intimidated, now he appeared calm and confident. Captain Zexhan, we appreciate your patience during our deliberation period. We have reached a decision regarding your generous offer to join the hegemony. Zexhan straightened in his command chair. Finally, these primitives were ready to surrender. We decline. The simple statement hung in the air for a moment before its implications sank in. Zexhan's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. You decline? Do you have any idea what you're saying? The hegemony reinforcement fleet will arrive shortly, and they will implement Alternative Protocol 7 without hesitation. Your entire species will be eliminated. Secretary General Chen's expression didn't change. We understand the consequences of our decision, Captain. We also understand that you've been having some technical difficulties with your ship's systems. A chill ran through Zexahan's exoskeleton. How could they possibly know about his ship's problems? Allow me to demonstrate something, Chen continued. Computer, execute Prometheus Protocol Phase 4. Suddenly, every system aboard the Dominion's Edge began malfunctioning simultaneously. Life support alarms screamed throughout the ship, artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, and the main engines went offline. Emergency lighting activated as the primary power systems failed. What have you done? Zexhan roared into the communication channel. We've been inside your computer systems for 2 days, Captain. Every circuit, every processor, every line of code. We know more about your ship than you do. Chen's voice remained maddeningly calm. But this is just a demonstration. Computer, restore normal operations. As quickly as they had failed, the ship's systems returned to normal functionality. Lights came back on, gravity stabilized, and the engines hummed back to life. Zexhan stared at his control panels in horror, realizing that his ship was no longer under his control. How is this possible? Our security systems are impenetrable. Your security systems were designed to stop technology similar to your own. Dr. Martinez's voice joined the conversation. They were never designed to stop biological computer programs that think and adapt like living organisms. We've essentially given your ship's computer system a very sophisticated infection. The tactical implications were staggering. If the humans could take control of hegemony vessels at will, their entire technological advantage was meaningless. "Captain," Lieutenant Vorth called from his station, his voice tight with fear. "Long-range sensors are detecting multiple objects approaching from the outer solar system. Massive kinetic signatures." "What? The reinforcement fleet isn't due for another 12 hours." The main screen shifted to display long-range sensor data. Dozens of objects were accelerating toward the inner solar system at tremendous speeds, but they weren't ships. They were asteroids, each one guided by sophisticated navigation systems and accelerated to combat velocities by hidden propulsion systems. "You see, Captain," Chen explained, "we've been preparing for this day for a very long time. Every asteroid mining operation, every research station, every piece of space infrastructure we've built over the past 50 years was designed with one purpose: defending our home from species like yours." Admiral Zhang's voice joined the conversation. "Our asteroid bombardment systems can target any point in the solar system with precision accuracy. Your reinforcement fleet will be destroyed before they can enter Earth orbit." "And that's just the beginning," added Dr. Chen. "We've weaponized our entire biosphere. Every virus, every bacterium, every fungus on Earth has been cataloged and modified to target the specific biological weaknesses we've identified in hegemony species. If any of your people set foot on our planet, they will face biological warfare unlike anything your sterilized ships have ever encountered." Captain Zexhan sank back into his command chair, the magnitude of his mistake finally becoming clear. The humans weren't primitive at all. They had been planning this confrontation for decades, possibly longer. Every aspect of their space program, their biological research, even their computer technology had been secretly directed toward one goal: making the conquest of Earth prohibitively expensive. "But perhaps most importantly," Secretary General Chen continued, "we're not alone in our resistance to hegemony expansion. Captain, meet our new allies." The communication channel expanded to include a new participant. The being that appeared on the screen was unlike anything in Zexahan's extensive experience. Tall, graceful, with features that seemed to shift and flow like liquid light, it spoke with a voice that harmonized with itself. "Greetings, Captain Zexhan of the Galactic Hegemony. I am Speaker Luminous Echo of the Andromedan Collective. We have been monitoring your species' expansion with growing concern, and we are pleased to find that the humans of Earth have proven themselves worthy of our alliance." Zexhan's world collapsed around him. The Andromedans were legendary, representing the only civilization powerful enough to challenge hegemony dominance. If they had allied themselves with the humans, the collective hereby extends full protection to the human species and their solar system, Speaker Luminous Echo continued. Any further hegemony aggression against Earth will be considered an act of war against the Andromedan collective. "This is impossible," Zexhan whispered. "How did a primitive species make contact with the Andromedans?" Dr. Martinez answered with evident pride in her voice. "We've been listening to their quantum communications for 20 years and working to develop compatible technology. When you threatened Earth, we contacted them and requested the opportunity to prove ourselves. Our successful resistance to your forces has demonstrated that humanity possesses the qualities the Andromedans value: intelligence, determination, and the refusal to surrender our freedom." Secretary General Chen leaned forward. "Captain, you have a choice to make. You can return to hegemony space and report that Earth is under Andromedan protection, or you can attempt to carry out your original mission and face the consequences. Through the bridge's observation windows, Zexhan could see the approaching asteroid bombardment beginning to light up the darkness of space. Each impact on the incoming hegemony fleet created brilliant flashes visible even at this distance. His reinforcements were being systematically destroyed by weapons hidden throughout the solar system. "Your reinforcement fleet has been eliminated," Admiral Zhang reported matter-of-factly. "I'm sorry for the loss of life, but they were warned to maintain their distance from our system." Zexhan looked around his bridge at crew members who had served with him for decades. Many of them were staring at their instrument panels in shock, unable to process the complete reversal of what should have been a routine pacification mission. "Captain," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a message from High Command." The message was brief and to the point. The Hegemony High Council had detected the Andromedan intervention and was immediately classifying the Sol system as a forbidden zone. All hegemony vessels were ordered to withdraw beyond a 50-light-year radius and avoid any contact with either humans or Andromedan forces. The great galactic hegemony, which had conquered thousands of worlds across the galaxy, was retreating from a single star system because they had underestimated the species that lived there. "Your orders, Captain?" Lieutenant Vorth asked. Zexhan straightened his shoulders and made the most difficult decision of his military career. "Set course for hegemony space, maximum velocity." As the Dominion's Edge began its long journey home, Secretary General Chen appeared on the communication screen one final time. "Captain Zexhan, please deliver a message to your High Council. Humanity appreciates the hegemony's interest in our development, but we must respectfully decline your offers of guidance and protection. We prefer to make our own way among the stars." He paused, and when he spoke again, there was steel in his voice that sent chills through every member of the alien crew. "And Captain, if the hegemony ever threatens Earth again, you'll discover that what you've seen today was just a small sample of what humans can accomplish when someone threatens our home. The next time, we won't be content with simply driving you away." The communication ended, leaving the bridge of the Dominion's Edge in stunned silence. As Earth fell away behind them, Captain Zexhan reflected on the catastrophic failure of what should have been a routine mission. The humans had taught the hegemony a lesson that would echo throughout galactic politics for generations to come. Never underestimate a species fighting for its survival, especially when that species had the audacity to call itself human. In the years that followed, the story of Earth's resistance would spread throughout the galaxy. The humans had accomplished something no other species had ever managed. They had forced the mighty galactic hegemony to retreat not through superior technology, but through superior preparation, determination, and the willingness to pay any price for freedom. And in the depths of space, Andromedan ships began establishing permanent stations around the Sol system, the first step in a new alliance that would eventually challenge hegemony dominance throughout the galaxy. The humans had kept their promise to prove themselves worthy of freedom, and now they would help carry that freedom to the stars.